County Democratic Vice Chair, our illustrious elected chair, Janet, is out of state, but working diligently behind the scenes, and very sorry that she's not here. Just shake hands with the rest of us. This is a nice, intimate setting. I am retired Navy. My husband Thank you very much. I'd like to recognize the rest of the veterans in the room. If you'll please stand for just a moment.
All right.
Thank you so much for your service to our country and now your service to our community. We certainly appreciate it. All right, so I wanted to just chat for just a second about what the redistricting has done to us here in Rice County. We have a lot more precincts, which means we are incredibly short on precinct chairs. We are incredibly short on poll workers. So please, if you have the time, you have the energy, come volunteer with us. We need door knockers. We need folks to help us with our social media campaigns. We need people to write articles. We need people to run. That would be the best. Okay? So come join us. Every second Tuesday of every month, we need right next door here at the Fairfield Inn. Okay, there we go. And we'd love to have you come on down. 6 to 6:30 is just social hour. We eat. And I don't know. So, and then 6:30 to 7:30, we usually have candidates come in and talk to us, which is fantastic. And we have experts come in and talk on the special topics of the day. So we'd love to see you all come on down. We're going to have to get a bigger meeting room if we can get you all to come, but we'd be thrilled to have to do that. So I'm going to introduce you now to Emily, who is going to introduce you. I love having you out here. This is fantastic. Okay? I did want to recognize our, just in case you want to chat with them, our precinct chairs over here. Mary, Vita, would you guys wave for us? Okay, we've got Karen, we've got Walt, we've got Joe. Fantastic. Rita's here, Jack's here, Ann's here. Okay? My husband and I are election judges. We'd love to chat with you. And then, of course, we have Mr. David Briggs. He's our SEC chairman. I'm going to turn you over to Emily.
Well, hello, everybody. So my name is Emily Boyd, and I was born and raised right here in Decatur, Texas. And I just can't tell you what an honor it was for me to cast my very first vote for Beto O'Rourke in 2018. And I'm so excited that my hometown has an opportunity to host such an event like this. And so I know we're all excited. So I'm here to the next governor of Texas.
All right, Decatur. Thank you for coming out. Good to be with you. Thank you, Terry, for kicking us off. To you and your husband for your service to our country, to the other veterans that were recognized earlier. We all understand that the reason that we're here is that there were those who came before us and were willing to serve and sacrifice and be part of some really important struggles to ensure that we can be the exception in world history. Defy the rule that we see in the rest of the planet today. 246 years in, the fact that we can peacefully gather and help together decide the future of this state, of this country, of this community, this county of Wise, peacefully, at a ballot box, non-violently, is pretty damn special. And we know that was secured for us by those who were willing to give their lives, and in some cases did. I think about those World War II veterans who in 44 were landing on those beaches in Normandy to fight fascism, half a world away to defend democracy right here at home. I think
Thanks for texting.
The Vietnam era veteran who came back from the war, this country never fully understood, and at best, he got indifference from the community that he returned to. At worst, the outright hatred of his fellow Americans, and nonetheless, put his head down, got after, raised his family, worked that job, maybe created other jobs by starting a small business, ran for office, maybe served his community. And as he sees these veterans coming back from Afghanistan, and Iraq, and Somalia, and Yemen, all these wars that we have been fighting for decades now, and meets these young people who are returning with exposures to toxic burn pits, you all who have not served have at least been reading about this. We're burning medical waste, body parts, and toxins, and chemicals, and literally God only knows what. And those service members working overseas are breathing that stuff into their lungs. They come home to Decatur, and it's a little bit harder for them to breathe now that they're here. That Vietnam era veteran who waited 40 years, 4 decades, ladies and gentlemen, for his exposure to Agent Orange to be treated as a presumptive condition for the cancers and the diseases and the conditions that were consuming him and those with whom he served, is first in line fighting for that veteran returning today to not have to wait 4 years. The reason the United States Congress just passed a bill that recognizes exposure to toxic burn pits is because of that Vietnam era veteran who is serving the veterans of today and making sure no one is ever treated with that level of disrespect in this country again. We're here because of the civil rights and voting rights veterans. Those men and women more than half a century ago who also were willing to put their lives on the line and too often lost them simply for the ability to register to vote in a county like Wise in the 1940s or 1950s, or before that to fight against the white primary. Those of you who don't know this history, you got to hear me out on this. 1923, this is almost 100 years ago to the day, the Texas legislature outlawed voting by black Texans. Now, it was not, you must pay this poll tax, or count how many jelly beans are in the jar, or recite the Texas Constitution, or pass a literacy test. I mean, they did those kind of things as well. But literally in black and white, they spelled out that if you were African American, you could not participate in this democracy, that your labor and your service, including in World War I and World War II, helped to secure. There was a doctor in El Paso at the time, Lawrence Nixon, African American physician. Moved there from Cameron, Texas. He lived in Marshall before that. Very involved in civic life in El Paso. In fact, he founds the first chapter of the NAACP in the state of Texas in 1914, right there. Votes in every election, never misses a one. So when he walks into that polling place in 1924, a year after this all-white primary law had passed, he's paid his poll tax, he puts his receipt on the table, he's recognized by the poll judge there, right? Because they know this guy. He's in there every single election voting. He's working with the city council and the mayor to build a new swimming pool for black children in El Paso because we still had segregated swimming pools at the time. And the election judge says, Dr. Nixon, you know I can't let you vote. And Nixon says, I know you can't, but I've got to try. And so, though they deny him the right to vote, he takes his case to a federal bench in the Western District in El Paso. He loses the decision. They just smash this guy down. So he appeals, takes it all the way to the United States Supreme Court, wins not one, but 2 signal victories. It takes him 20 years, but by 1944, same year those guys from this community were landing on those beaches in Normandy, he wins the ability for everyone in this state to participate in our elections. What I'm telling you by this is that when you look at the kind of attack that we face today, and you're Republicans, you're Democrats, you're Independents, you're Texans, you're Americans, we're human beings, we all care about this, right? It shouldn't matter the outcome of the election as long as it was fair and free and legally decided. The fact that it is harder to vote today in this state than in any other in the union. Harder to register and get your name on the rolls so that you too can go up to that election judge and cast your ballot. Harder here than in any other state. The fact that we have a gerrymander that allows those in power to pick their voters instead of the other way around, that we closed more than 700 polling places in this state, the fastest growing state in the union. We've closed twice the number of the next closest state. Guess where those polling place closures have occurred? In the fastest growing black and brown neighborhoods in the state of Texas. One ballot drop-off location per county in the middle of a pandemic. They killed 100,000 of our fellow Texans. One drop-off location in Harris County that has more people in it than the entire state of Nevada. And then this is the kicker, to bring it back home. Close the loop. 95-year-old World War II veteran from the state of Texas. And we don't know if he's a Republican or a Democrat, because it doesn't matter, right? Tries 3 different times to mail his ballot in. We have vote by mail in the state of Texas. You got to qualify. You got to be over 65 years of age, or you have to have some significant disability. 3 separate times, this guy who is willing to lose his life fighting that fascism to preserve this democracy here cannot get his ballot counted. And you tell me if there's someone among us who has earned that right more than that gentleman has. We have the test of our lifetimes, perhaps in the lifetime of this democracy here in Texas before us. But I tell you right now, not only can we overcome and prevail, but we've done it before. Let's look at those who came before us against much greater odds. And yet at the end of the day, their courage, their strength, their persistence, their faith and their belief in themselves and one another, they made this moment that we're in right today possible. We are their heirs. What we do with this inheritance that was passed on to us from their service, their struggle, their sacrifice, all too often the blood that they shed, the lives that they gave, will determine our future, and it's going to define us in the eyes of our kids forever. Because if they're too young to fully grasp what is happening today, I guarantee at some point, they'll talk to us, and they'll say, hey Dad, hey Mom, Grandpa, Grandma, what were you guys thinking back in 2022? When my very right to vote was under attack, did you stand up to be counted? Did you save it? Did you overcome this challenge? Or did you submit? Did you give in? Did you move to some other state? Did you hope that someone would ride to the rescue and save the day for you? Ladies and gentlemen, no one's coming to help us out. This one will be decided by the people of Texas. But I've got some news for you. We are going to win this election and get this state. We're going to win this election because we are a people who put country and our state before party or any other difference that might otherwise divide us. We're going to win this election because we are fighting for the most important rights that we used to take for granted. We're going to win this election because we're fighting for every woman to make her own decision about her own body, her own future, her own health care. We're going to win this election because we are fighting for every kid who's returning to every classroom to have as their only concern or worry, did I get this homework in on time? Am I going to pass this algebra test? Coming from a kid who's in remedial algebra for 3 years, that was my worry. We're going to win this election because we're going to put their lives over the profits of the gun lobby, the special interests of the NRA. We're going to make sure that we do the right thing by and for them. Look, we're Texans. We all grew up with an understanding of what it means to be a responsible gunner. Like many of you, I grew up with guns in the household. In fact, my Uncle Raymond was a sheriff's deputy in El Paso County. He was the jail captain at our jail, and this was his pride and joy. He won the Sharpshooters Marksman Award for the El Paso County Sheriff's Department. So he insisted on being the one to teach me and my 2 sisters how to use a gun, but also taught us the responsibility that comes with owning that gun, right? And so we either accept, after 5 of the deadliest mass shootings in U.S. history, which have taken place in this state in the last 5 years, that we're just inherently violent or evil or murderous, or that there is something that we can do together to defend the Second Amendment and better protect the lives of our children. Let me run a few past you. What if, at a minimum, we raise the minimum age of purchase for an AR-15 from 18 years old to 21 years old? Valley, who is sending off such signals to those around him that his friends call him the school shooter before he ever walks into a school and shoots anyone? What if we had some way to be able to intervene through due process and remove that firearm from the household until we've addressed all the legitimate concerns we have? That's why we're fighting for a red flag law in the state of Texas, so that we can be able to do that. And look, most of us who ever purchased a firearm have gone through some kind of background check. If you go to a gun shop or a federally licensed dealer, they have to do a background check. And I love that because it means that if you are a violent felon, or if you have a history of abusing your spouse or your boyfriend or your girlfriend, or harming yourself, there's a way for us to stop what otherwise might become inevitable and very deadly. But if you buy from a private seller in the state of Texas, there is no background check. And I'll give you an example of why this is so important. The month after 23 of my neighbors were slaughtered in El Paso in 2019, a guy walked into a gun dealer in Midland, tried to buy an AR-15, didn't pass the background check. It's great, it works. But because we don't have a universal background check, he went and purchased the exact same weapon from a private seller, no questions asked, perfectly legal, deal is done, takes that firearm and uses it against the people in that community, killing 8 in the process before losing his life. You know, adopting a universal background check will not save every life, will not prevent every instance of gun violence in the state. Let us acknowledge that. But let us not accept that as a reason not to do anything at all, because it would have prevented that violence in that community. Red flag laws would have prevented the shooting in Uvalde. Raising the minimum age of purchase would have averted so much tragedy, loss of life, and suffering. And you know what? It does nothing to fundamentally compromise your ability to own that firearm or defend this Second Amendment. We are Texans, and we're going to do this. We're going to save the lives of our kids and lower any other interest. And speaking of those kids, the reason these young people have a chance to do great things for themselves and for all of us is certainly because of these amazing parents and grandparents that they're with right now, but also because of those classroom educators, right? The teacher in front of them, the counselor, the librarian, the support staff, the school bus driver. You know, that school bus driver is gonna notice if something's not right with our son or daughter when they get on that bus, if they're feeling a little low, a little down, a little undernourished, a little anxious. They may notice something when they drop them off at the end of the day. Did something happen to you today at school? Were you bullied? Is someone picking on you? Are they threatening you? Do you have a meal to go home to if you're on free and reduced breakfast and lunch? These educators in our public schools are our heroes. I mentioned democracy at the outset. There are few places where our democracy is working better than in our public school classrooms, because regardless of your parents' party affiliation, or who they pray to, or who they love, or how many generations they've been here, or whether they got here last week, we all come together and define not by our differences, but by our effort and our achievement and our willingness to work and come together and see each other not as our mutual enemies, but as friends, collaborators, and allies. And yet we're losing these teachers right now by the thousands across the state of Texas. My youngest, Henry, just completed his 5th grade year in June, just started his 6th grade year a week ago. We start early in El Paso. But his entire 5th grade academic year, not a single permanent classroom teacher. You know, God bless the subs, but having 5 subs over the course of that year, he and his classmates lost out on that continuity and consistency and stability that permanent classroom teacher brings. Now, why is she not there? Well, it may have something to do with the fact that in Wise County, a teacher here on average is underpaid by $10,500 a year. Across the state of Texas, that teacher is asked to turn in the parents of transgender kids for child abuse, even though those parents are just trying to do everything they can to support that kiddo, love them, make sure that they can reach their full potential. The governor is trying to scare us about CRT, a phrase I had never heard of before. And listen, I'm not the smartest or most well-read guy on the planet, but I have a sinking suspicion that they cook this thing up to scare us and distract us from the real challenges that we have right now. So some ideas on how to get these teachers back in the classroom or attract the next generation of recruits to come into public ed. What if, and this is gonna sound crazy, but what if we paid teachers enough to not have to work a second or third job to make ends meet? Or for retired teachers, what if we ensured there was a cost of living adjustment every single year going forward? They haven't had one in 18 years. We could also do away with something called the windfall elimination provision, or the WEP. Real quick on the WEP, this is nuts, but if you have taught in public schools and if you've also worked in the private sector, let's say you worked serving beers in a bar, or you worked in one of the manufacturing facilities nearby, or you worked in one of these great cattle raising operations. You paid into Social Security every quarter, just like every American. But in this state, we punish you, and you're not able to receive back the earned benefit that you paid into through Social Security. The only explanation I can find for this is that at some point in our history, retired teachers were getting filthy rich at public expense. They were living in these big mansions, lighting dollar bills on fire, just putting it in our faces, and we had to put a stop to it. Now, there's no good reason for the WEP. There's no good reason for not having a cost of living adjustment in more than 18 years. And listen, for those retired teachers, their kids or grandkids who are thinking about entering the profession right now, they look to them in their 70s having to work a job or two just to get by, and they say, is this the future that I want? Do I want to give the best years of my life and sustain this kind of abuse from the sitting governor of the state of Texas? No, I don't want any of that. And then last kicker, in terms of explaining what's going on, especially in rural communities, there's this idea that the governor has cooked up called a voucher. And what that means in plain terms that I think I can understand, and you may be ahead of me on this, is that he wants to take the public tax dollars out of your classroom and away from your underpaid public school teacher, turn it into a voucher, and send it to a private school. Now, I have no grudge against private schools. If you can afford to do that, want to do that, that's the best choice for your kids, get after it. But to take money out of this community in Wise County to fund a private school that may be in Dallas or Austin or Houston or somewhere else is adding insult to injury for those teachers. So here's what we're going to do. Not only are we going to stop those vouchers, fully fund teacher pay, we're going to invest in our public schools. We're going to listen to you when you tell us how you want to teach and connect with those kids. We are going to cancel the STAR test in the state of Texas as well. Make sure you can do what you need to do. And then I want to say this. I don't know, and you tell me, because I don't follow his every move or action. I don't know the last time Greg Abbott was here in Decatur holding a town hall meeting like this where he would take your questions. But my impression is that he's sleeping on you all. He thinks these votes are in the bag. Wise, he'll tell you, is a red county. I don't have to show up there. I won't be held accountable by these people that I'm supposed to serve for how I'm spending their property sales tax, the income that they make, that they pay into the state of Texas, for the quality of their schools, the way that we're treating these teachers, the lack of investment in your infrastructure right here, the struggle of these ranchers that I'm hearing from, whose every input, whether it is feed, fuel, or fertilizer, or the fact that they're being crushed by the corporate slaughterhouses. There are 3 of them in the state of Texas, and they're dictating the price. It's a cartel. It's a monopoly almost. And it's going to end the way of life that makes this part of Texas so proud, and that literally fuels the Texas and the American economy. I want to be a governor who shows up for you now, who comes back to you after we win this election, who is being held accountable by you, who's using this budget surplus to make sure that we reduce the pressures
on these farmers and ranchers and homeowners, who brings down your property taxes, which have been raised by Greg Abbott $20 billion over the last 7 years, who ensures, and this is another crazy concept, but hear me out on this one, who ensures that we can keep the lights on and the heat running and the water flowing when the temperature drops in the state of Texas, who goes after the $11 billion that was stolen from us by those pipeline companies, those energy traders, who, when Abbott pegged the price of electricity at its maximum allowable rate, when you were freezing, and all too often freezing to death in your homes, gas was trading at 200 times its normal rate. Utilities in Texas have gone into bankruptcy proceedings. Others have taken on billions of dollars in debt. And each of us is paying on average $45 more per month to keep the lights on in our home. When that's compounded by the fact that for rural Texans, he vetoed something known as the Universal Service Fund, which underwrites the cost of rural telephone and rural internet, because those big corporations were never going to wire you guys for speed. It was just too expensive. They wouldn't make enough profit. So we as Texans decided, whether we lived in El Paso, Houston, or Decatur, that we would subsidize that expense so you could be just as competitive as anybody else anywhere else. It's a legacy of Lyndon Baines Johnson, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and the Rural Electrification Administration in 1936, when those big companies back then wouldn't wire your towns for light either. And so we stepped up, we met you halfway, we partnered with you. Well, your governor just canceled that partnership right now. I'm meeting people whose internet bills have shot up to $140 a month, $160 a month, and higher. Compound that with the utility bills, the rising property taxes, the fact that he shut down U.S.-Mexico trade for more than a week, even though we import almost all of our produce from that country. So what you pay at the grocery store has gone through the roof as well. Greg Abbott, the number one driver of inflation in the state of Texas. Number one way to address it is to replace him with somebody else who's going to do something about it. That's what we're going to do. Look, I can't hear you. I can't hear you right now because I'm talking and other people are trying to participate. I will, if you'll be polite, I will give you the microphone. First person I'll give the mic over to, because we're not afraid of each other. We live in a democracy. We may not agree on everything. We're going to look for some common ground. So, Cynthia, if we're all polite, civil with one another, I want to make sure that we hear from him first. Okay. Last couple of things that I want to say. I want to live in a state, and I hope that you do too, where we're not governed literally by our fears and who we're supposed to hate and who they're going to scare us about next. I mentioned this CRT stuff. That's crazy. This pursuit of trans kids, as though there's some kind of crisis. The governor literally called a special session to go after trans kids. However you might feel about this issue, and the way I feel is that I love that those kids are here. I want to get their backs, fight for them every single day. But however you feel about it, is that the most important thing for us to be pursuing right now in the state of Texas? This anxiety that he tries to stoke about immigrants and our border. And let us all concede or acknowledge that our immigration system is badly, badly broken. Democrats are responsible for that. Republicans are responsible for that. Americans are responsible for that. We have not rewritten our immigration laws since Ronald Reagan was the president of this country, all right? I'm not blaming anyone. It is on all of us. But our failure to fix it means that demagogues in positions of political power are able to vilify and demonize immigrants, scare us about who's coming in to invade us, the infestation that Donald Trump told us about, the animals who are coming to get us, the rapists, as he said in his maiden speech when he was pursuing the highest office in the land, echoed by our current governor, who on the eve of that El Paso shooting, where the gunman who walked into that Walmart and slaughtered 23 people said, "I'm coming to repel the invasion of Hispanics who are taking over my state." Came here to kill Mexicans, he told police after he was arrested. On the eve of that, Abbott sends out a mailer that says, "Texans, we must defend ourselves. We must take matters into our own hands." What do you think this guy in Allen, Texas, who bought that AK-47 and drove it 650 miles to El Paso, what do you think he was hearing when the president, when the governor of the state of Texas speak in these terms? So listen, it's now on all of us to fix this, or that will be our future, our fate, our fortune going forward. The solutions are in front of us. And I've heard these from Republicans, from cotton growers, from gin owners, from electricians, from engineers, from high-tech companies who say, look, the immigrants who come to this country make us better. They're filling jobs that in some cases we're unable to fill otherwise. However, what we have at the border today is far too chaotic. And the stunts being pulled by our governor, busing these migrants to New York or DC, building a few miles of wall, involuntarily activating 10,000 members of the Guard for a 1-year deployment, a week to say goodbye to their families and their kids, and they're gone for a year. 8 of them have died since this deployment. 4 of them have killed themselves. 4 of them have died in questionable circumstances. None of them were killed by a migrant crossing this border. Those stunts are not making us any better. So what are the solutions? Let's make sure that we have a Texas-based, which means Democrats don't write it, Republicans don't write it. We listen to one another as Texans. We write it together. A Texas-based guest worker program. If you want to come here and write code, start a technology company, pick onions in Brownsville, work in the slaughterhouse in the Panhandle, be one of those gin operators in Roscoe, Texas, we want you here, but you have to come legally. And we want there to be an orderly, safe path for you to do that. So we're going to write our laws to make sure there is. If you want to join family, because the wait time from Mexico today to get into the back of the line is 20 years, people. And I don't condone anyone jumping that line. Nothing justifies it. You got to follow the law, no matter how irrational that law is. But I understand why people do that. And they will continue to do that until we lift those per country caps and ensure there's a legal, safe, orderly way to join your family here. One more group, and those are the asylum seekers and the refugees. Now, some people came to this country, 15,000 years ago. Others were brought here in bondage and forced to build up the success and the wealth of this country. Others, like the O'Rourkes, fled here from famine and certain death in Ireland in the 19th century. Otherwise, our line would be extinct right now. And it's that tradition of refugees and asylum seekers coming in right now from Honduras, in Guatemala, in El Salvador, and so many countries around the world who are continuing that tradition that has existed here for nearly half a millennium. We've got to make sure that our laws reflect our values, our needs, and our interests, and who we are at our best, not at our worst. I guarantee you, if we can rewrite those laws to reflect who we are as Texans, we take the vast majority of people who want to come to this country off the table, and we deal with them through a legal, safe, orderly process. And then anyone left who wishes to do us harm, you want to traffic fentanyl into Texas? You want to trade in human beings and traffic them as well? Well, you were a needle in a haystack before. We got rid of the haystack. We now know exactly who you are. We're going to stop you, prevent you, keep our communities safe and secure going forward. We're going to make sure that we live up to our promise and our full potential in this state. And instead of it being you or me, you're too trans, you're too gay, you're too immigrant, you're too this, you're too that. In our Texas, it's going to be you and me, all of us together, making sure that each and every single one of us has every opportunity to succeed. Por el último, if you want to be part of this campaign, and again, we're going to pass the mic around to listen to you, because my best hope of hitting the ground running in January of 23 and serving you effectively is to listen to you and to learn from you first. But if you want to be part of this campaign, which is a first important step to getting this work done, then you can sign up with someone in a yellow vest. And I've got Miles over here. I have Emily back here. I've got 2 amazing people in yellow vests. They have a list of block walk appointments. This means that you sign up and go knock on the doors of complete strangers. Well, maybe neighbors that you're on a first name basis with, or you've made eye contact before. But these are conversations where you knock on the door, and from your own heart and in your own words, you describe how important this election is to you. With your own ears, you listen to them about what's most important in their lives, and you make that connection and say, you know what? If we want to make this better, we've got to vote in November. Can I count on your vote? And I'll tell you what, there's a far greater chance that we will be able to count on that person's vote if you show up than if no one ever knocks at all. Best way to save this democracy is with more democracy. And the best way to do democracy, in my mind, is to show up and meet people where they're at, eyeball to eyeball, face to face, human being to human being. It's the most powerful thing in the world. And if we do that, we win this election. You all ready to win? All right, we're going to get this state back on the right track. Thank you for coming out. Looking forward to what's on your mind. Le agradezco. Muchísimas gracias. All right, Cynthia Cano right here has the microphone. She's in this white guest shirt and the black ball cap. She's going to hand the microphone to this gentleman. We're going to try to get as many people into the conversation as possible. If you'll keep your statement or question brief, I will try to return the favor and be brief as well so we can get as many people in as possible. Thanks for being patient, and here's the mic.
Couple questions I've got. And first of all, you're exactly right. We need to have discussions, not wars, not fighting amongst one another. But I'll say this, because I've led it here in Wise County, and it's not been the Republican side that tried to come in this community and tear it up and all of that stuff. I know, because I was the one that led the thing against it. That's neither here nor there. What you're saying is absolutely true. We need to talk. We need to come. That's why I'm here today. I was asked to be here. But there's some problems I have. Number one, the teachers you were talking about. Every teacher I know that's quit hadn't quit over Republican policies. Teachers right now that are just, I'm done, is because they're not able to teach. They have the teachers now are having to do all the tests, all the stuff, and dealing with all of that. Like they say, I can't teach anymore. They're quitting because of the pressures they're under. They're not quitting, even over the pay, because most teachers do it from the heart anyway. And I agree wholeheartedly. Teachers ought to be one of the highest paid people there are. But they're not. But they still do it from their heart. But when it gets to the point that they can't even do from what's in their heart, there's an issue. That's number one. You brought up the guns. Beto, I went to school with guns in my back window, guns under our seat. You know, the funny thing is, we never shot anybody. But here's what all this politician, I don't care which side, all this garbage about guns is just that garbage. It's political garbage to hype the world.
Let's be respectful. Please. I want to hear what this guy has to say. Please.
It's true. Because most of the people who you see that come out and do all of this stuff, they don't go down here to the local store and buy their gun. They buy it on the black market. And you can up the thing. If you're going to up it to 21, then how about this? How about make it where the military, okay, you're going to say, well, you don't have to go off and fight war till you're 21? You see, that's a double standard. But the people that we're sitting here saying, well, it's going to fix it if we raise the age to 21. No, it's not. Because most of the people who go and buy those guns do not buy them. They don't even go to the gun shows and buy them. They're going to find the guy that they can get to where the gun's untraceable or they think it's untraceable.
Yeah.
That's who they're going to get.
Some good points. Let me respond. And first, I just want to again say thank you for coming out. And I just got to say, it's not easy to come into a room where you may hold a minority opinion and where there are folks who are going to be upset or disagree strongly with what you have to say. And I appreciate that. And listen, I think, I keep talking about democracy. The only way this thing is going to work is if we're willing to hear each other out and find the common ground. If we only hang with the people who already feel the way that we do, came to the same conclusions that we did, we're just going to deepen this divide in this country. So I'm just grateful that you came out. And let me respond to what you said. You said, look, it's not Republican or policy, and maybe you thought it was Democrat, or it's not Democrat either. It's these pressures on these teachers. I think you and I actually agree. One of the things I talked about was that STAR test. The reason I find it to be so wrong-headed is that not only does it fail to effectively measure the potential of that child or the effort expended on that child's behalf by the teacher. Teachers are telling me that they're spending not days, they're spending weeks, sometimes months preparing their kids for that high pressure, as you mentioned, high stakes test, because if they fail to perform on that test, it's really kind of a punitive tool. Their school districts lose out, their schools lose out, they lose out. My kids, who are sophomore, freshmen in 6th grade now, the night before that STAR test, they're wired and they're anxious, and I bet you it's because their teacher is wired and their teacher is anxious. So I think doing away with that test and having teachers come up with a replacement, some kind of diagnostic that you don't prepare for, but a snapshot in time, where do we need to get resources? How do we get help to the right person? That makes sense. And then hear me out on this. I wonder if we can agree. What if our next TEA commissioner is a classroom teacher? That works. And on the guns, I think I want to accept the much of the premise of the gentleman's statement about guns. And I said this earlier. We can do the three things I described. It will not end gun violence, and it will not eliminate every time we have somebody who inexplicably maybe uses a firearm against somebody in their life or somebody in our lives. But I think we have to acknowledge it might reduce the likelihood that happens. You mentioned, criminals don't follow the law, and they'll find some other way to get guns. And I think that's true in many cases. But in Uvalde, this guy waited patiently till he was 18 years old to buy those 2 AR-15s and the hundreds of rounds. He didn't try to get one on the black market when he was 17, although he was itching to do it, or 16. If we raise it to 21, we at least have 3 more years of some kind of intervention to hopefully get this guy moving in a different direction. If we have, in addition, a red flag law, because this guy was sending off signals that he wanted to do something like this, we can intervene before it's too late. I think there are legitimate concerns about that. How do we make sure there's real due process? And you can't just flippantly accuse somebody in your life of wanting to do something harmful so their guns are taken away from them. Let's figure out on Texas terms, you and I, how we can get this done, because there's no way that you're okay with the fact that we have those 5 mass shootings in the last 5 years. You care about your kids or grandkids as much as I do mine. We want them to be okay. There's got to be something better that we can do. And we do have a proud tradition of gun ownership. You mentioned it, going to school, having the gun in the rack in the back of your truck. I mean, that's El Paso as well. That's Texas. So we can figure this out, but I think we're moving in the wrong direction. Abbott signed something called permitless carry last year. And we used to have something called license to carry, which I supported, right? It just meant if you want to carry a gun in public, we're totally fine with that. Just get a background check. Have some training so we know that you're proficient in this firearm before you take it out. Allow us to vet you to make sure there are no problems. 38,000 times over the last 5 years of the license to carry program, 38,000 times law enforcement said this guy or this gal shouldn't have a gun in public. They have a history of violence or self-harm. They'll be a danger to us. That's why police chiefs, sheriffs, deputies, officers begged the governor not to sign permitless carry that would end license to carry into law. He did it anyhow. Gun violence has spiked. More cops have been shot down in this state than in any other in the union. Now, none of us want that outcome. I guarantee Greg Abbott doesn't want that outcome. We just need somebody, though, who has the political will to do the right thing. I think you got to stand up to some of these interests. And I love the way that you're talking about, regardless of whatever party or whatever special interest, let's just do the right thing. I think we can find some common ground on this. I want to hear what you think. I've shared my piece on this. Tell me your thoughts, and if there is any common ground.
What needs to be told is how many people, private citizens with a weapon, have stopped mass shootings, have stopped all that thing. The difference, hold on, guys.
Yeah,
the difference is responsibility. I went through this with my own son. Remember when all the three-wheeler stuff come out? Everybody was up in arms over three-wheelers. Get rid of the three-wheelers. My son started racing four-wheelers at 11 years old. And it was kind of like this. Man, everybody thought I was Satan. But like I told him, I said, what the difference is you don't know is I go and I do it with my son. I had worked with my son for years. My son went out the first year and won the championship. It's called responsibility. It's called teaching. I was taught, like you said, you were taught by your grandpa. I was taught about guns. I was taught about you never pointed a gun at somebody. I was taught all those things. The problem today is kids want to say, here's the keys to this. Here's the gun. Go out the street. Go out and follow it. They don't want to take responsibility for the actions. I hear it all the time in what I do. Is parents say, well, it's not my responsibility.
Thank you for coming out. Again, really, really appreciate it. All right, we're going to go to some other questions. Ms. Connell.
Thank you. Just one comment for the gentleman here. I agree with you about responsibility. I have found nowhere in the Second Amendment where I have the right to carry weapons of war. And I have seen weapons of war. I've spent 31 years serving my country. With education, watching and hearing the reports of the CPAC convention in Dallas this week, my personal concern, and this is a personal concern, is some facets of the Republican Party don't want to teach our kids. They want to bring them up with a philosophy that lends them to the Republican beliefs of the future. I think they're trying, when they're talking about we got to take these books out of the library, we got to take these books out of the library, you can't read this, you can't read that. In other words, they're dictating, in my opinion, history. What part of history can you learn? You can learn this part of history, but you can't learn this part of history. My wife spent 30 plus years teaching, and she knows that it seems like this governor and a lot of politicians across the nation want to do away with the Department of Education so that they control the narrative.
But I have to eat too, and I have to pay my bills. And when I spend $70,000 for my bachelor and my master's degree and my training to work with these children, I have to pay those bills. So I don't care about your opinion.
Well, let's be respectful. I think actually all of us here are so grateful to you for your public service. Taking $70,000 in debt for the privilege of teaching our kids and maybe having to work a second job, not getting a cost of living adjustment in 18 years, just over the last year, 9% plus inflation, the cost of everything that she and I and you are encountering, and yet her income is not rising unless she works another job. So I think this just underscores how important it is. And I just want to echo something the gentleman said. He said this should be among, if not the highest paid profession in the state. I agree. I cannot think of a more important investment for us to make in the long-term economic prosperity and growth in our democracy than what these teachers are doing. And to the gentleman's point, when you have elected politicians who've never spent a day in a classroom dictating what you can or cannot teach, we get away from this personal responsibility that gentleman's talking about. I mean, we live in this democracy, right? Look, if you live in Saudi Arabia, if you live in Russia, if you live in Iran, North Korea, that's a different deal. There's a dogma that you must follow. There's an orthodoxy from which if you step away, you are toast in a lot of cases. Here, we pride ourselves on the ability to have a diversity of different ideas and opinions and thoughts, but to make sure that we're working with the same set of facts. And I think that's all that I hear from social studies and English and history teachers across the state. Look, they're not doing it for the dollars or the glory or the fame. They're doing it to answer this extraordinary call to public service. And if they're willing to do that, I feel like we should have their back, not just in what we pay them, but in how we support them in what we do. And that does not preclude, I just want to underscore this 3 times, that does not preclude parental involvement in your kids' education. Amy and I, and I'll say mainly Amy, are as involved as parents can be in our 3 kids' education. Every parent-teacher conference, we're there. Go to school board meetings regularly. Want to make sure that our opinion is heard along with other taxpayers and parents in the district. We want to make sure that we have the best system of public education, but it's got to be all of us. And we are driving away teachers at a frightening rate. Here's the consequence. You know who pays the price at the end of the day? It is that child. In the average 4th grade classroom in the state of Texas, 7 out of 10 of those kids cannot read at grade level. They cannot read at grade level in 4th grade. They're not going to catch up in 5th, 6th. I don't know if they'll get there by their 12th grade year. One of the reasons that someone coming into Texas from outside of Texas, whether they come from Mexico or Oklahoma, is twice as likely to have post-secondary education is because we failed to invest in our schools. And those folks coming in from the outside very often are getting the highest paid jobs that are being created here in the state. So, for every reason under the sun, let's do the right thing and back these public school educators, end this CRT nonsense, and get back to prioritizing public ed as the best long-term investment in the state of Texas. Thank you both for what you have to say. Good luck.
Sorry. I just have one question. It's one fear that me and my friends face every day because we're part of the LGBT community. We hear so much blame get put on us that doesn't even regard to us with, like, it is not just one side. It's like both sides wanting to blame our community for something that wasn't even our fault. And, sorry. But we also face dangers of, frankly, one of my friends got death threats because she is lesbian. What is your plan to guarantee our safety to where we are able to feel safe in Texas, period, where we don't have to fear going out and thinking somebody's going to attack us?
Thank you for asking. We were talking about moving from a state governed by somebody who says it's you or me, and trying to make some afraid of others based on the differences, to one where it's you and me. I mean, all of us can do together, and our differences don't define us and shouldn't divide us and shouldn't determine our options or opportunities in our lives. Well, when you have a governor who's issued this executive order pursuing the parents of transgender kids, or legislators who are introducing a Don't Say Gay bill, kind of another attack on teachers in this next legislative session, or this, some of you may not know this, though it's not okay, it is legal to deny hire to somebody because of their sexual orientation, or to fire them because they're gay. Though it's not okay, it's legal to deny adoption to a same-sex couple. We have 32,000 kids in the foster care system in Texas. 100 of them lost their lives in the custody and care of this state in the last year and a half. It is the worst-run foster care program in America, and yet you can be too gay to adopt one of these kids who needs a better home today. So what are we going to do about this, right? So that everyone knows that they're in the right place. Because I don't want you going anywhere else. And I don't want you feeling attacked, or you or anybody, based on any difference between us. So we've got to understand what we're up against. Not only did the Supreme Court overturn Roe versus Wade, putting this back to the states, and our state has a total ban on abortion, no exception for rape, no exception for incest. But they said next on the docket is right to contraception. Following that will be same-sex intimacy, literally reviving the sodomy laws in a state like Texas. And following that is marriage equality. So not only do we have a bad set of cards here in Texas, there is more coming down the pike right now. We need a government, and all of us need to come together as a state to stand up for one another. So to overturn those laws that allow you to be discriminated against, and make sure that there is no room for discrimination on any basis in the state of Texas, to repeal this executive order going after the parents of transgender kids, make sure that any Texan, including if you're transgender, feels at home and proud to be in the state because we're proud of you. And recognizing that talent comes in every form imaginable, and we want it to be right here in Texas, even if we're unmoved by the moral argument that you're making. And that's what moves me, by the way. If we're just looking in our cold, calculated self-interest, if this state is hostile to people based on our differences between us, they're not coming to Texas, or they're leaving this state to go somewhere else, and they'll benefit that place at the expense of this one. So I just want you to know that I am so proud of you, glad that you're here, going to fight for you every single day, and make sure that we get this right. Thank you for coming out.
Okay, I have time for 3 more questions.
Okay.
Hi there. I really love Beto. He's got such a sweet, caring heart. I was, as an ex-teacher, it is stressful. Those tests are very, very, very stressful. The other stress is I believe in immigration and so forth, but it puts a lot of stress on the schools. Having these extra kids can't speak English, etc. So if that's something you can work in, that would be wonderful. The thing that I really am happy about is that you are offering solutions, and that is what we need.
Thank you. Yeah. And you know what? Let me extend that to we are offering solutions, right? So many of the things that we're going to do are going to come from this room. When I was in Congress and I served on the House Veterans Affairs Committee for 6 years, and I was a Democrat in a Republican majority institution, the way I was able to get things done was by listening to veterans in rooms like these who said, hey Beto, did you know that veterans with an other than honorable discharge can't get into the VA? And they're taking their own lives at twice the rate of the general veterans population, which is already way too high, and we got to fix this. And I said, I'm sorry, I didn't know that. Let's get to work on it. We wrote a bill, got it passed by working with Republicans across the aisle, even compromising some. I know that's a dirty four-letter word among some in this room right now, but it again was the only way we were going to be able to get this done. Got it signed into law by Donald J. Trump, the one man on the planet with whom I agree on almost nothing. We can find common ground on that as well, but it came out of a town hall like this. Same with fixing the grid. We were talking about the inability to keep the lights on in the energy capital of the world and your utility bills going through the roof. Well, there are solutions, and you all have told me what they are, like winterizing and weatherizing the grid. You know that last February, gas froze at the wellhead. Now, it doesn't do that in states that are further north than us because they've winterized and weatherized, made those investments. Another thing you told me is, why are we on an island? Why don't we connect ERCOT, our grid, with the national grid so we can draw down power when we need it, send it back up when we don't? And that 11 billion I mentioned, you know, not just immoral but illegal. State statute says you cannot price gouge in a time of declared emergency or disaster. Specifically cited in statute is the price of fuel. I mentioned it was trading at 200 times the going rate. Let's go after those illegally gotten $11 billion in profit. Return it to you. Those are 3 solutions that came from rooms just like this one. Thank you. Ms. Connor.
Sorry, a little bit. Here we go.
Okay.
Hello, long-time listener, first-time caller. So I love everything you're saying about teachers. I'm married to a teacher, so I see it firsthand. The struggle is real. I worry for his safety. Every morning he goes to go to school to be a teacher. And I didn't marry a cop. I didn't marry somebody in the military. I didn't think that would be something I would have to worry about. So absolutely, gun control is something that needs to be talked about between everybody. But I'm also seeing that a lot of these, not everyone, but a lot of the shooters that do cause these casualties are mentally ill in some form. And I didn't know if there was something you have thought about for that to help. I mean, as in Texas and I think across the United States, we don't handle mental illness well.
No.
It's not talked about. It's taboo. I mean, growing up when I was younger, just having anxiety and depression, you don't talk about it. You just deal with it. And I'm happy that now, especially with our new generation coming in, they're so open. I love it. You know, but I just feel like even more in the schools, it needs to be talked about in a way for people to recognize it before it becomes an actual problem. I didn't know if that was something you did.
Thanks for asking this. And please thank your husband for us, for his service, and you as well. So, a couple of quick ideas as I get to your question. Many educators, many parents, many school children have come to me at meetings like these and they've said, I've got an idea for my school. What if we handled entry and exit in the following way? Or if we had some perimeter fencing in these areas. There are things that people have ideas about that I think we should listen to and partner with and ensure that we spend state resources to do. Folks understand their campuses and their communities better than I ever will, right? That's one. 2, we talked about measures that we could take to defend the Second Amendment, but reducing the likelihood that someone's going to get a firearm of this caliber and use it against kids like that. But we acknowledge, and you just did, that won't stop every one of these shootings. So we come to this 3rd issue, and this is the one raised by Greg Abbott, in fact, the day after Uvalde, on that stage, in that community, when he told the families it could have been worse, and I can't imagine how much worse it can be for those families. But he said, we've got a mental health care challenge. Well, if you accept the premise of that, you must also accept that we are 51st. Every other state in the District of Columbia has better access to mental health care than does the state of Texas. The largest provider, if you haven't heard this, you can look this up, it's true. The largest provider of mental health care services in our state is the county jail system in the state of Texas. Largest in-person patient facility for mental health care is the Harris County Jail in downtown Houston, Texas. Not only is that unacceptable and unconscionable and immoral, it's incredibly expensive. You, the county taxpayer, and I, the county taxpayer, will pay, depending on your county, 80 to 120 bucks a night to keep someone locked up who has untreated schizophrenia, uninsured because we didn't expand Medicaid, and literally will go up to a sheriff's deputy and try to get arrested on purpose. I'm not making this up. I've heard this time and again across every community across the state of Texas. If lucky, that person gets a bed, maybe a change of clothes, a shower, somebody to look over them, maybe even some psychotropic medication administered to them for a few days, and then they're back on the streets. We can only imagine the cost and consequence and the suffering of these folks who are going through something that they'll never be able to cure or make better or get any help for. What's the solution? We mentioned Medicaid expansion earlier. Medicaid will bring $10 billion of your money and my money. These are federal income taxes that we've paid into Washington, D.C. They'll send $10 billion of that right back to us. Not free money, not a handout, not a giveaway, our dollars, to expand a program that, get this, we came up with in the first place. LBJ signed the Medicaid Act into law in the summer of 1965. We just said, look, you can't be too poor or too unlucky to be healthy enough and well enough to raise your kids or go to work or finish your education. And we're the only state in our region not taking yes for an answer. Louisiana, Arkansas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, our 4 border states, 3 with Republican governors, have all taken the deal. We, for some reason, are holding out. But we expand that Medicaid, we bring in that $10 billion, we allocate it towards mental health care along with primary health care, along with other needs. We're still not there. I mean, we may no longer be 51st, but I'm not done until we're number 1. So we need to supplement that with additional state spending to connect people with care. And we will get the question, just to anticipate this, hey Beto, that sounds really expensive. And it might be, but it's a whole lot less expensive than the way that we pay for this today through our county jails. I promise you, we will save money. People will be able to go back to work. They'll buy that house. They'll pay their property taxes. It'll reduce the burden on your property tax bill as a result. And we will all be better when everyone has a chance to do better. So thanks for asking the question. Really glad you elevated this issue.
Hey, to your right, back here.
There you go.
Thank you so much for being here and visiting West having a Decatur. It means a lot to a lot of people in this community. You brought up education benefiting our kids for the future. How about the environment? You talked a lot about the grid and the future you see for it, but there's a lot of pieces to the environment that have a lot of younger people worried. What are your thoughts on that?
Great, thank you for asking. I'm aware that we're in an area that is experiencing unprecedented drought. And I mentioned that I keep meeting these cattle ranchers and farmers, and when we're further west in the Panhandle and near Lubbock, cotton growers and the gin operators, and they say, you know what, I don't know how much longer we're going to be able to do this. I remember being at a meeting just like this in Glasscock, and a young farmer came in, and she said, you know what my grandparents planted and grew, my parents planted and grew, I'm planting it, it's no longer growing. And she said, I'm missing my kids' basketball game to come here, Beto, to ask you what you're going to do about the fact that climate change isn't coming. It is already here for our family. We're going to lose this operation right now. If we're listening to our neighbors in Houston, they saw the opposite problem. More rain fall out of the sky in a single 48-hour period than has ever been recorded in the history of North America. This isn't God. This isn't Mother Nature. This is us. These are our emissions, our excesses, and our inaction in the face of the facts and the science. So, question is, with all of these, what the hell are we going to do about it? We can diagnose the problem. Now it's on us to take action. Couple of thoughts right here. We are the energy leader for the world today. And that's a private place that I will cede to nobody. And it was purchased through the hard work, the innovation, and the ingenuity of those in the oil and gas industry here in Texas. I drove here today in a Toyota Tundra from Mineral Wells. It's burning gasoline. And for as long as we have a need for this as a fuel source, I want it to come from Texas. I want it to be refined in Texas. I want the jobs to be right here in Texas. But you and I both know that the world is moving in one direction right now. And the only way we're going to meet our commitment to avert a catastrophe for our kids and our grandkids is to make sure that we are the energy leaders of tomorrow. That means investment in wind, where we already lead the nation, but we can do more. Solar, where we're number 2, we should be 1. Hydrogen, geothermal, battery storage, technologies that you're going to dream up of, and I could only begin to imagine. That's where the world's going. Some country's going to corner that market. I'd rather it be the United States than China, and some part of this country will corner it within the US, and I'd rather it be Texas than anywhere else. When I go, I mentioned Roscoe and the cotton gin. Let me just tell a really good story about why doing the right thing for the environment and the planet is the right thing for Texas. I'm in Roscoe, Texas. You know, that hotbed of liberalism and progressive politics in our state. And we're at Roscoe High, and I learned that every kid who graduates not just with a high school diploma, but with an associate's degree. I love it. 2 years of college under your belt, you're 18 years old. A certain percentage of them graduate with an FAA remote pilot's license because they need somebody to do the drone inspections on the wind turbines that dot the landscape in Roscoe and Sweetwater, that not only dot the landscape, but deepen the tax base so much so that they can afford this associate's degree program for every single graduating kid. They don't have the shortages that we see here in Decatur or in my hometown of El Paso, because this investment in the next generation of clean energy is producing not just jobs, but reasons for those kids to stay in the very community that nurtured them in the first place. Absent that, they're on the next train to Dallas or somewhere else. Now they're staying right there in Roscoe. So we are sometimes offered this false choice that we're going to replace people or do away with energy resources, or people are going to have to lose their jobs en masse. And I don't buy that. We're going to be the energy leader today, but we are going to be the energy leader tomorrow, and we're going to lead the planet on doing the right thing at the right moment with what we have, where we are. And that describes us here in the state of Texas. Thanks for asking the question. Appreciate it.
Okay, this is going to be our last question. So I know a lot of us have like siblings or grandkids or, just stepkids or anything. So with them going back to school, because my sister's going back to school today, so I'm in a way, I'm terrified for them. So I guess my question is, with the campaigns that you've been doing and, all the gun laws and the mass shootings that we've had, how will you take our input that you're getting and put that into your work once you are governor?
I love this question because, and Cynthia, who just took the microphone from you, was my district director. She ran my El Paso office for 6 years when I was in Congress. And one of her biggest responsibilities was to host a town hall meeting like this every single month. And it was always in a public space, all comers welcomed, no holds barred. Anyone could ask any question. We would sometimes stay so late that the owners of the building would kick us out and we'd finish the meeting in the parking lot. The best thing about those meetings is I knew I would have to face you. So I'm taking a vote on the floor of the House, right? U.S. representative, what an amazing, fortunate position I found myself in. How lucky can a guy be? But I know that I'm going to have to answer your question at the next town hall meeting. That's why did you vote this way on this issue? Or where are you on this proposal to make our schools safer? You told us you were going to do something when you visited us in August of 22. Now you're the governor. Where are we at? Holding these town hall meetings on a regular basis and doing them in the communities that I serve, regardless of what the overriding political sentiment is, I don't care how red or blue, how rural or urban, is the best way for me to do the best job. There should always be a healthy dose of fear in my gut of the people that I serve who put me into this position of public trust. It keeps us honest, it keeps us working, it keeps Cynthia up at night because she knows that I'm going to get asked this question and better have a great answer when we get in the door. So I commit this to you because I threw some shade on Abbott for not having shown up in your community and taking your questions at town halls like these. That's no good if I don't come through and do the right thing instead. So I commit to you that I will come back, not only to get your input, but to be held accountable by you for delivering on the things that we talked about today. We're going to be able to do this together, and I'm looking forward to it. Gracias. Ms. Connell, Cynthia is saying that was our last great question. I just want to thank you all for coming out here today, everybody for coming out here today. Emily for being a second-time voter and also a volunteer. She's a place to sign up, folks, and that's a great reminder. We're going to stick around if anybody would like to take a picture or shake hands or just share something really quickly. And on the way out, we're going to ask you to sign up for one of these block walks. Thank you for coming out, folks. We are going to win this campaign. We're going to win this race together. Gracias. Thank you.
start in the room, and it'll be, you see Angela waving to the other side of the room. She's over there. That's where we're going to be. We'd love a chance to say hi and take a picture if you'd like to join.